Most of you probably don't know that in the early days, I used to make a little bit of extra money at my cooking school by going into people's kitchens and actually helping them clean out the pantry. And my theory was that we don't really use our pantry to cook from. It's not like our grandmothers who used to have their pickled vegetables and their meats and everything already in the refrigerator, in the freezer, in the pantry per se, where they could really make dinner from it. It was the base for all of the cooking that they did. But for us, we are very recipe driven, which means that we look at a recipe, we buy what ingredients we need. So like when I made those great baked beans a couple of weeks ago, and then what I do is I just wrap it up, take the extra, and then I throw it into the abyss of the pantry. And maybe if I need to make those beans again, I go back to the grocery store, I make a shopping list, I shop for them, I buy the beans again, I end up with that same extra cup left over, I wrap it up, and I throw it into the abyss of the pantry. Now, unless you're moving or someone dies, the odds are you don't end up going back through the pantry. And we've all been there when you're gathering and collecting all of those bags of half-open beans. Well, I think that especially in this time, we're cooking more and more at home. And it's really important for us to get in that pantry and start to learn what's there and stock it so that each and every day, as we're cooking our meals, we end up with a pantry that we've built with things that we can cook. And so what that means is we need to think a little bit about the ingredients that we have. Now, who doesn't end up with a pantry full of oils and vinegars? You know, they really are the backbone for me for all the cooking that I do. So I want you to take a look. This is actually an old antique toolkit that my grandfather had on their ranch in Colorado. So you know, looking at this, with all of the cool little holes in it, that it had his screwdrivers and the hammers and everything else that he needed. Well, I've turned it into this great oil and vinegar pantry for me. So I want to show you what that means. I have things like an olive oil. Now this is Badia Cotoblono, which is an extra virgin olive oil. Notice that it's in a dark green jar, and I use this to make things like salad dressings. I drizzle it over vegetables, but I'm always cognizant of the fact that in your pantry, you want to make sure that you keep your oils for about 1 year. So no longer than a year, and don't buy them in a clear glass bottle. Now, vinegars, of course, I love because they can be marinades, they can be delicious brightness in a salad dressing, and so much more. It's a great item when you don't have that lemon or lime to bring out sweetness in a dish and lower the bitterness levels. So here are the ones that I have. I mean, of course, we've got to have a great balsamic vinegar, something that's going to bring out flavors and sweetness, and that you can make really delicious things out of if you didn't want to add any fat. That's going to last for about a year in the pantry. You'll also notice that I've got some that are these fruit vinegars. Now, you could keep them out at room temperature, but take a look and make sure that you've had them only for about a year. And if you want, when you buy them, if you're not sure you're going to use them, just mark them with a date so that then you know when to actually have to use them up or throw them out. And then the last thing is, I also have some flavored oils, and let me tell you something, whether it's a nut oil, a sesame oil, or one like this that's a lime oil, this is that perfect, flavorful thing, even over lettuce greens when you don't want to do anything else but salt, pepper, and a little bit of oil. So get in that pantry, get those things cleaned out, and make sure that you've got the dates on them so that you know how old they are. Now, one of our culprits in the pantry are your spices and herbs. Now, one of the things that you should know about spices and herbs is that spices, like ground cinnamon, and I know you probably think this tin looks really old. This actually came from my cooking school, nothing to it, and I refill this tin with fresh cinnamon every single year. Dried spices like this will last 18 months, and dried herbs, things like this Italian parsley or oregano, will last for 1 year. If you have a spice cabinet that is in the light, what happens is all of those oils will start to dry out in it and it won't have as much flavor. Now you can take these herbs if you want to and just sort of grind them in your hand before you put them into the pan, and that will actually help bring out the flavors as well. So you can do a couple of things. If you just can't part with these herbs, rub them in your hands and then add them to your tomato sauce, or you can toast them a little bit in the pan to start with. You know, moles and other dishes where they toast the herbs first. Toasting the nuts, toasting the herbs brings out the oils. Just make sure that you do not over toast these or it's gonna smell like you're smoking something funny as you're cooking. Now, other great ingredients that I wanna show you, because there are things that also should be kept on hand in your freezer pantry. So take a look. I've got things like fresh seafood, and this seafood will keep for about 3 to 4 months. So if I'm not sure what I'm going to have for dinner, I can always pull something like that out of the freezer. I've got soups and soup stocks so that we can keep those, even a little bit of barramundi if you wanted. All of these ingredients that keep, oh, like I said, for about, like my fish dish, for about 3 to 4 months. This way again, if I've got things like rice and beans in the pantry, then I could add that to my fish dish and be able to get dinner on the table. Let's look at some of the other ingredients just so that you know as you're digging into your pantry how long they'll last. So rice, for example, any of your rice and pastas, beans, those are all going to last 1 year as long as you keep them in an airtight container. So go through, take a look. If you have to, put them in a glass jar if you don't want to use plastic. There are people now that actually will do everything in jars to make sure that they're airtight and that their ingredients will last the longest. So keep those in an airtight container. Same with your beans, same with your pastas. Look for things like a great Italian pasta. And then when we start to think about building this pantry from the sea, which I am really excited about, I'm keeping things in my pantry like different seaweeds. And in the coming month, you're going to see me use all different types of seaweed in my cooking, as well as different canned goods. Canned meats, canned tinned fish and seafood, which are really delicious, that are going to make the base for a paella even. And then of course we've got things like our friends from Open Blue Cobia, and this beautiful fillet of cobia that we can thaw relatively quickly. You can almost thaw this by running it over under some cool water and it'll thaw right away, and it's ready for the donabe, ready for dinner in minutes. Now, I also like to keep on hand kind of non-traditional antipasti ingredients, because those to me really form these layers of beautiful flavor. So take a look at this. In my pantry, I've got all kinds of things, like a little artichoke and lemon blend that I can put over a little bit of bread or crackers, or even layer on that fish and be able to bake it. So look for things that you really like that are maybe some of these tapas, tamponades that really can add flavor. And I find that exploring for these is really fun. So when you go to like a grocer or you go to your favorite specialty store, you can start to find them. I mean, look at what I found. This was actually from Oakville Grocer, and it was a smoky sweet tomato jam. So when I think about jams and jellies, these are things that are all gonna last about 1 year, again, in the pantry, maybe a little bit longer. But I would take this and I would maybe melt it in a pan and saute carrots in it. And it would be glazed and beautiful in flavor. This is something that I could brush over those beautiful tilapia fillets and be able to bring out flavor. So you get the idea that sometimes the pantry can give us these building blocks, kind of a little boost without really having to follow a recipe. And I've got lots of other things, from olives to different types of mustards. For me, mustards are just, I mean, they're really this gift from heaven for the pantry. Because if I take these mustards, put them all into a baggie, and I've always got on hand like 5 or 6 different types of mustard. I can put them in a baggie, toss in whatever meat I'm doing. It could be some shrimp or those scallops. Use it as a bit of a marinade and a coating, and then just bake them in the oven. There's really no work to this. So it's keeping all of these things on hand. Things like olives. It all depends, I think. The pantry really depends on what things you like. The pantry can be built on different types of ingredients, things that you're learning about and wanting to explore. But what I will say about this pantry is that it should be built with ingredients that you like. Because if I tell you to buy paprika or a little bit of curry powder and you know you hate curry powder, then you're never going to get in the pantry and use it. And it's going to just end up being thrown away. So the idea really here, as you start to explore this, is to get in your comfy clothes, take everything out of the pantry, freezer, refrigerator, and the cabinets, line everything up, see what's okay, meaning what's in date, what's out of date, get rid of what's not in date. If you have things that you're not using, think about donating them. I mean, all of the food banks certainly need food now, and so if you know for sure you're not going to use that coconut milk, then go ahead and donate it. It's a great thing to do. And then once you put all of those ingredients together, you can go and you can do a little bit of shopping, and you can start to really build the pantry that you want. The idea is this. It's actually pretty simple. My grandmothers used to have a pantry that was built to cook from. And what I mean by that is that they didn't have to have a recipe for dinner because they knew that they could take the fish and they could take a little bit of curry and they could simmer it in the coconut milk, put it over a little bit of rice or beans, and then they had dinner on the table. And if you start to begin to get a little bit creative with this, and not so intimidated. Just take your time, you know about the foods, look up individual ingredients and their cooking method, and allow yourself to veer away from the recipe. I know that you're going to be so much more satisfied with the foods that you cook, and you're not going to be as stressed out about it. So keep tuning in because we're going to talk about these items all throughout the coming months. The pantry from the sea, how we can add in great ingredients like our Quarry Arctic salmon and seaweed and blackberries to make a beautiful baked salmon, and lots of other things, tinned seafood and all things coming up. And you'll start to begin to build your pantry so that you can get dinner on the table in a snap.